Brother,
Amen.
thanks for being with us so much. We crossed paths up in Ohio, and my best friend, my dearest friend, is from Sandusky, Ohio. So he's going to be
Yep.
happy that we're doing this interview. And I think you read The Little Big Church, and then at the time, you either gave me or mailed it to me. I can't remember which one. You gave me this book, I get a lot of books sent through us to the Little Big Church, a lot of books sent to me through the Soul Trap. And so, I have a stack of my own reading, and it was like, okay, I'm going to get to that. I like the name Satan's Devices, and I'm going to get to that. But yeah. But some books come along and they hit you at a particular journey, part of your journey in your life. So just to give you a quick little background, I didn't go to Bible school. I went to University of South Florida. My degree is in history, and emphasis on military history and leadership studies, that kind of thing. I met my wife. She was working on her master's at the time from University of South Florida. We served the Lord and went on from there. But for the most part, I was your typical Baptist preacher. Preached the truth, loved the truth, went home and ate 6 buckets of fried chicken, just did my thing. Physical health was nowhere near. Sleep, science, all that stuff was touchy-feely, new agey. Who cares about the body? Then my body started breaking down. It started affecting my life, my ministry. My daughter, at the same time, became a physical fitness instructor, a personal trainer, works with all different kinds of people, but a lot of times people that are in need. She basically talked me and my wife into doing nutrition. I started working out, and then nutrition came along, and it just blew my mind. I began to realize what a deep connection there is between spirit, soul, and body. One of the mottos we talk about is not every problem can be solved in the church. Some of our problems have to be solved in the kitchen, in the gym. We have to take care of that. So fast forward, I then pursued a certification as a nutritionist. And then in that, as I was going along with that, the science of sleep came up. My wife and I do an immense amount of counseling, and almost without exception, occasionally, people's lack of sleep would begin to come up. I had never before talked about their diet or their nutrition or any of their physical habits. It was all spiritual. Read more Bible, pray more, go to church more, and all those have their place. But now we were adding in the component of the body. Then I started doing some study about sleep. And in fact, I'm currently right now working on a sleep stress management certification, the science of sleep, not just, have lavender in the room, but the actual science of sleep. I don't believe in the world's methodology, but where the world touches the church and truth, I think we can glean something. So about that time is when I got your book, when I started working on that. And that's when I started looking at this. And one of the things that came up was the digital Swiss cheesing of our mind, the destruction of the circadian system, our rhythm that we're in. There were so many things that I was studying that the world, and I'm using that term distinctly, the world was pointing out that when I opened your book and started reading, in my mind, well, the world's finally catching up to the party. The Lord was already telling us about this ahead of time. So I set all that up to say that when I read that book, I told him, we got to get this guy on. We got to talk about this, because this actually could be a 500-page book. There's so much material in there, and it's right on target. So that's my story. I read this. I'm like, we got to get this out to the churches, because pastors are dealing with this that they've never had to deal with before. So in a nutshell, take just a few minutes and give us your background. I found it fascinating in your testimony that you have an academic background and working with addictions and in ministry. Give us very briefly that background, and then I want to jump into how you came to writing the book.
And before I forget, before I let it slip, not to take the conversation in the direction of sleep, but a book you might want to read is Why We Sleep. The doctor's name is escaping me right now, but it's a book that I've read. I haven't read all of it. I think I kind of skipped ahead to some of the chapters I was more interested in. But he brings up some really interesting things on like dreams and how that helps us deal with trauma and helps with creativity and all these different things. But
I believe, did you reference that in this book? Did you reference him?
I don't know if I did or not.
Okay, I'll double check because there was several authors that I wrote down, but Why We Sleep. Okay, go right ahead.
But yeah, so my bachelor's of science is in systems and behavioral neuroscience at Ohio State. I got that from 2013 to, I believe, 2017. And during that time, I had several part-time jobs. I worked with children with autism on emotional regulation, behavioral training. I worked in home with most of them, did some educational aid work with them. And then I did like a supervisor job at like the rec center, working with sport clubs, intramurals. That was kind of a whole different field, I guess, but a little bit management. And then I was a research aide in a neuropathology lab. So I was on 2 papers published. We were looking on one paper about breathing centers in your brain, at the back part of your brain. And if there's a specific gene that's like a marker for like irregular, not being able to regulate your oxygen and gas levels in your blood. And then the other one was looking at like neuroengineering. How can you target a specific neuron and try to reprogram it? So those were 2 of the papers I was on in undergrad. And then while in undergrad in 2016, I gave my life to the Lord. I was raised up in church in a pastor's home. I got away from the Lord for several years. And just finally, as a 21-year-old man, I was tired of living, for the world and for myself. And asked the Lord forgive me for my lifestyle and then use me any way that he could. And whenever I did that, he directed me to Amazing Grace Baptist Church, Charity Mission. Brother Joe Beechler is a pastor there right now. Pastor Jimmy Hood was the one who started the work back in the 90s. And without trying to, I just started working with the men, just helping at the mission, helping with the homeless. It's an inner city church, so it was nothing for a Sunday morning for, prostitutes to be around, drug addicts, drug dealers, homeless people coming into our services. And the men's home was through that church. And I know it sounds crazy, but I fell in love with that ministry. I fell in love, that work, and working with the men. I love working with men struggling with addiction. I think that the reason why I don't work in the mental health field clinically is because I feel like secular means are they're just not even they're not even scratching the surface of what these people need. They're struggling with addiction. Sure. But through the Bible, through biblical counsel, you can help people get through addiction, PTSD, trauma, depression, all those things. If it's just taught the right way, mixed in with like a holistic approach. So like you said, sleep, health, things like that. So I did that for around 3.5 years. I directed the men's home. And like I said, worked with men with all kinds of different mental health disorders, not just drug addiction. There's usually other disorders in there as well. And then I was my father's assistant pastor for 3 years while I was getting my doctorate in occupational therapy. So my clinical doctorate's in occupational therapy from Ohio State. One of the occupations of life that we do, apart from like activities of daily living, like dressing, bathing, toileting, grooming, we also are specialized in sleep participation. That's why whenever you mentioned that, I was wanting to geek out and talk about it, but that's one of the other things. We engage in like social participation, helping people get back to things socially, maybe after a trauma, after a surgery, things like that. So there's different fields of occupation we can work in. And I wrote my thesis for occupational therapy on management styles in the healthcare system. Mm-hmm. So I actually looked at what evidence-based leadership styles have been correlated with employee retention, low employee turnover rates, employee job satisfaction, quality care outcomes for patients, decreased fall risk, things like that, to find like what research shows is like a good leadership style, what traits do those people have. And yeah, now I'm at this Rock Baptist Church. And not that I don't have a men's home yet open. We're praying Lord would help us have men's homes in the next couple of years. But God has given me plenty of opportunities to help people that are struggling with different mental health issues. And I've just, God's been using a little bit with this book, Satan's Devices, and then I'm writing another book on mental health right now.
Okay.
And so yeah, that's kind of where I am. You asked me a little bit about my background, okay, right, and how I came.
So that gives us really an introduction to a little bit about you. And like I said, I find it fascinating. The way the Lord works in providence. I think there's certainly a place for, the Bible college, that kind of thing like that. But I do think, like in my case and in your case, there is sometimes an interesting where the Lord brings through providence, where we have maybe a little toe in each stream, certainly, of doing that. So that brings me to, this book. Tell me and tell the audience, what was it that brought this to a head? Because what it looks like to me, and I could be wrong, but it looks like that it's pieces of research. I almost could see different breaking, when I look through the lens of messages and things like that, I could almost see different messages, thoughts, research, a little bit of data from here and there, and then it's put together. What brought you to say, okay, I need to put this book together and this needs to get out? What was the driving force behind that?
It might not be the wonderful, deep motive that you're looking for. I genuinely, this is not a hobby horse for me. Like, this is not something, I don't even want to say I'm not passionate about it. I'm truly passionate about it. As far as writing this book, though, it literally came up by, there's a friend that I have, an evangelist, that he's an evangelist, but he also has he calls it the Bible Mobile. I think I mentioned him, Ralph Easterling. And he kept telling me, listen, you need to write a book on the effects of screens on our minds.
I think I met him out there.
Yeah, you probably did.
Okay.
And he's an old truck driver. Me and him look like, the exact opposite. But he's a good friend of mine. And he just kept telling me that, the church needs this, write a book on it. And I kept telling him, nobody's going to read it. Nobody wants to, there's plenty of other books out there. There's secular books out there. I'm sure there are Christian authors that have written things on this. And he's like, but there's not a Bible believer that has at least considered both the science behind it and the Bible, a spiritual perspective. And he kept telling me to write it. I prayed over it. And I think I spent in total about 60 hours on it over the course of a year, I believe. I just put it in my calendar. I would put it in my Google Calendar, Satan's devices for whatever time I scheduled that week. And I just, you mentioned of where I'd like to expand on the book or like hash things out more. Really, everything in the book I'd like to hash out more. So I tried writing it in a way. I knew my audience. My audience was not the college atheist or agnostic who's a skeptic and has a PhD, because I know that they would take a book that is that small and be like, you didn't explain this or that, or you misled here or there. I wasn't writing it for them, although I hope they're interested in it. I was really writing it for Christians who are kind of stuck in this, like you mentioned about science is not needed, forget all the science, psychobabble type stuff. I want to show them that there is science behind what preachers have been saying for decades of this stuff is dangerous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The old mountain preacher from the hills of wherever that has been saying, bless God, you need to get that TV out of your house and things. People hear that and they go, well, that's just my preacher. What does he know? And it's it all just came to a head of, I just wanted to provide pastors and parents with the support that they need to be like, hey, these are some ways that this stuff is affecting you. It doesn't even scratch the surface of all of it, but that's kind of what brought it to a head. I wrote it, and it seems like it's been a big blessing to people in the churches and pastors, and I'm amazed at it because I never thought that it would be. I didn't think that it would.
Yeah.
Do that.
It's interesting. I was just reading another book recently, and it was a mainstream book per se, mainstream Christian book on Psalm 23. I told my wife when I got about halfway through it, I said, I can tell that this was this guy's thesis. I mean, the way that it was written, you can tell that it had that collegiate, I've got to support every single thing because it'll get picked apart. And you just have that feel. Once you've read it, you know what you're looking for. When I saw your testimony, I'm interested in getting to the meat of what's going on. I'm like, okay, this could be what that is. So I was interested to see, am I just looking at a mini thesis here? What that gets dry and that kind of thing like that. Man, it couldn't have been further from the truth. It was well written. Obviously, to me, the academic sourcing is there in the sense that I mean that you have the proof is in the pudding. I think that the quotation, your bibliography in the back here, your references, they speak for themselves. So you're not just hatching this stuff out, nor are you just rehashing, just re-quoting the country preacher or Lester Roloff. All of those guys I agree with, by the way. But you're actually pulling from real statistical data, and you're going, this is what's happening. Yeah. But the spiritual element is just off the chart good and simple and very, very attainable for the average Christian. So let's jump in real quick. I don't want to give the whole book away because I want people to read it, and they need to do that. But let's jump in, and I'm going to hit just a couple things that I think are very interesting to me. The first thing that jumped out to me is page 1, 2, and 3 we're looking at, data that is almost, look, you can always find data to support whatever you want.
Correct.
But this data that you're looking at right here, this is stunning. And one of the things that stood out to me was, and I know that there's a lot here, but I'm going to switch gears just a little bit to the gaming. On page 2, the average male gamer is 34.
Yeah.
Now, to get that average, and I'm not a mathematician, but I would assume you'd have to have some in the higher echelon to get the average to be 34. And then it says in 2018, the video game industry generated $43.4 billion. And here's what made it pop. It's not the lazy kids. It's mom and dad playing Temple Run, Candy Crush, Pokemon Go, Fruit Ninja, Angry Birds, etc. You just made a lot of enemies there, but nonetheless, what's happening with what is the addictive nature that you're seeing that all of these statistics are telling you? What is the addictive nature of these screens? And let's, for the sake of our discussion, let's just keep it to the phones, if we can. I mean, because I know that there's a broad way, but I don't want to get into the warp and woof of the computer, the personal computer, work computer, TV. Let's just talk about the monster that we all hold in our hand. Why is that so addictive, and what are these statistics telling us?
Well, there's a lot behind the science of that I probably couldn't get into and speak, intelligently about it in terms of the dopamine reward centers in your brain. But all of those things are geared towards literally like pulling a slot machine. And there's another book. This is actually a thesis by Benjamin Clark. I don't know if you have this one or if you can see it. Strangely Dim by Benjamin Clark. I think he went to TBDI and has his master's, and that is an actual thesis. He covers a little bit about the addictive piece of technology. It is a little bit longer of a book, but and he just came out with that within the last year, I believe. And so there's all kinds of just using one, for example, like the Candy Crush thing. I've never played it, but I know what it is, where you line them up and then ding, and then they all drop and all this. And that's literally your brain is that's a craving for your brain to get to hear that sound, to see it all click. It's literally what a slot machine is. It's like gambling. And so whenever it comes to if you want to talk video games specifically, there's a part of it where that is the piece. You want to see level completed. You want to see that kill shot. You want to see those things. Your body generally craves it on a hormonal level, but then also on a psychological level. One of the things I've been looking into a little bit more with my book on mental health is video gaming as one of the gateways for devil possession and spiritual oppression. And same things with movies. So whenever you're playing a video game, you're role playing that person. So if you're out there killing people or slaying demons or whatever game you're playing, or you're playing one of the games where you are a devil going around killing people, which that's a game now. There are several games like that. I've known Christian kids that are playing games where you're a devil possessed teddy bear that's going around killing the families that are trying to buy the house. The danger is that you're imagining doing that. Your body, your mind is trying to figure out, how do I kill this next person? How do I, do this next deed? And you're ultimately going into another life. There's a game called Persona. It's called Persona 5. And it's literally, if you read the description of it, it's basically you can go into another lifestyle, taking on these personas and living whatever kind of life you want to live. And you get to explore the minds of corrupt adults on your off days from high school. It's just this real wicked game. And it's anime related, but it's on PS5. You can buy it. And I think that's one of the dangers of just the video games itself. Why are they so addictive? Is that you get to be something that you're not. You're not a soldier. You know what I mean? If you're watching a Hallmark movie, you are not in that relationship with that man or that woman. I hope the man isn't watching Hallmark, but you're not in a relationship with them. It's all fake. It's not reality. And I think that's why it is so addicting, is that you really can be something else. And I think that goes into a much darker, deeper spiritual conversation. But also, I think that's why it's addicting at a basic level, is that you're getting to pretend to be something that you're not, and you get to escape reality.
Okay, so that on page, on the second chapter, and I'm looking at this as we go along, but in chapter 2, one of the things that you brought up is the prefrontal cortex, PFC, and on page 10, you talk about screen time's effect. And I just want to read a little section here on page 10 for those that are watching, and then just to bring us, she said, people who have internet gaming addictions have reduced cell counts in their PFC, demonstrating a reduction of brain matter in the area. And then you have references for that. In layman's terms, they are, quote unquote, frying their brain, frying their PFC with overstimulation and destroying brain cells in that region. Now, this is what's interesting to me. You said basically the participants showed decreased ability to stop impulsive behavior and had more random activity in their brains that lead to decreased attention and focus. Now, I tied this in, I think I tied this in later on with something you brought up, but I wrote down at the bottom of the page here for myself, I wrote down chicken or the egg, because what's happening with kids, are they ADHD? Are they autistic in a biological framework? Which I think there's an argument to be made about that whole new frame. Is that a real biological reality, or is that a consequential reality of these kids being overstimulated with screen time at home, screen time at school, screen time at homework? They now have to do their homework online. Is it possible that the actual problem that we're trying to medicate is a problem that we're causing and we don't even realize it?
And I think that's what I try to stay away from a chicken and egg conversation in terms of, because I think people will take this a lot of times and be like, some people will take it, and that's what I want to stay away from was TVs are the cause of everything wrong, with our children and with society.
I'm just asking the question, right?
No, but I like the question though, because it is important. I think it does play a part though in all this. So, and research shows that as far as increased distractibility, decreased focus and attention, I have a slide. I do a presentation on this as well about this. Can you still see me? I'm not going to bring it up or anything. I just had a stat. It's one of the newer slides I added in. An increase in screen time has been shown to decrease self-control, increase distractibility, increase your ability or decrease your ability to finish tasks. It actually causes decreased curiosity, meaning you don't even look into things as much. Like you're not as interested in learning. It causes increased feelings of loneliness and depression. Like all these things that we say these children with ADHD have, screen time has, I believe it is playing a part. And if, like I said, if it's one thing that you can cut down on and control that's going to make your child's life better, then we need to be aware of it. And I think it is one of those things of which one came first. There are other factors. I believe there's biological factors. I believe there's pharmaceutical factors, genetic factors, hormonal factors, just behavioral things even. Making your child sit for long periods of time whenever they're not ready to. You know what I mean? Like that can kind of cause a frustration. It's like putting a dog in a cage all day. Like it makes the dog go crazy.
Well, I think, not to get down into the weeds, but I could probably geek out on this as well too. But I think that basically our public school system model is an Austrian model, where they're sitting in classrooms, they're sitting in rows, they move based upon bells and signals, and there's very little outside fresh air, very little whole health that's based into it. Even in the old days, they used to have, PE and go outside and have breaks in the morning, and you didn't go to school until 8 or 8:30, and then you were out. So it was interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, and maybe this is a technical question, because you brought that up about that, the PFC, even when you're dreaming, which is why you feel emotions in your dream, it doesn't really know that it's not real. So that has a real problem with that. Real or fake, you said on page 11, the PFC is still actively responding to the stimuli it receives. Okay.
Right.
And then you give several examples down through there, and you brought up Call of Duty, which kind of cuts close to home. But anyway, no, I'm joking.
I used to love it too.
Here's the question I have. Okay, why then let's go 100 years. Let's see, 2020. Let's go 100 years. Why 100 years ago, when Johnny and Bobby are out in the backyard with their cap guns playing cowboys and Indians? Why 75 years ago, when Johnny and Bobby are out there and they're playing the Americans and the Germans and they're playing war? I was a little boy. When I grew up, we used to play war. We'd run around and we'd make guns out of sticks and swords and everything. Why is that not as brutalizing as is it the images? Is it what's happening on the screen? Or can you speak to that a little bit? You understand the question that I'm asking?
I do understand the question. And I'll say this to your credit. That is the first time I've had someone ask me that question. That is a very good question of why is that different? Playing those role playing, like killing somebody with a video game versus, live action role playing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm able to share my screen. If not, it's fine. I can still read this to you. But am I able to share my screen?
Hold your call for just a second. We're not live, right? We're just recording?
Yeah, we're just recording, but you send it to me.
Okay, why don't you just, when you're through, just send it to him. Okay. And we'll get that plugged in and we'll bring it up. Okay, go ahead.
There's a slide I would send you, and it talks about gamma waves, beta waves, and alpha waves in your brain. So 3 different waveforms. And alpha waves are whenever you're in a relaxed or a passive state, like a sleepy state. You're not really focused. You're not really paying attention. So alpha is active whenever you're sleepy, whenever you're not paying attention. Gamma and beta are for whenever you're critically thinking, you're being creative, you're focusing on something, you're involved with it. Now, studies have shown that whenever you're watching a screen or playing a video game, at least television, I'd have to look for 100% to say that video games are the same thing, because I know you do use some creativity with video games. But I know whenever you're watching TV, alpha waves go up, which are those waves that are you're not paying attention, you're sleepy. It's almost a passive hypnosis type state. Like you're not actively thinking. Alpha goes up and gamma and beta go down. Those ones that you use for critical thinking, creativity. Now, I don't know if that's 100% true with video games. Just because I don't know I don't remember the study exactly that mentioned that specifically. But I would say if you are actively playing like an Indian, like you're using your body, you're using a tool that you created, a stick, whatever it was, and you're pretending to be a cowboy or Native American. Let's not be offensive to anybody.
I'm good. I'm good.
Sorry, a cowboy or a Native American. But you're pretending to use that toy. I would say, I don't have a study offhand, but I would say studies would support that you are using more of the gamma and beta because you're critically thinking, you're being creative, and it's you using your body versus the images, like you're controlling an image that isn't your actual body. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. I'm wondering too, I was thinking about theta waves because I've just, not beta, but theta waves. I've just been thinking about that recently, some of the studying I've been doing with the sleep and things like that. Excuse me. And how, one of the things that's interesting is in our culture today, because of our technology, we're able to trick the biological body. We're able to trick the body in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. So we're tricking the body with weight loss, things that we're doing now. We're tricking the body with the serotonin uptake inhibitors. Those don't really work, but we tried to trick the body in that way. And we're tricking the body with light as well, too. When our body should be starting to produce the melatonin and wind down, we're saying, no, it's still daytime. You've still got, And I'm wondering if that's not happening with the predominance of the images that we see. And I'll give you an example what I'm talking about that maybe goes into what you said. Years ago, we took some teens and we went to Washington, D.C. And when we got out, if you've ever been to Washington, you get the metro, you can go down to the mall where the Washington Monument is, and you come up out of the metro and you literally walk out and boom, there is the National Monument, George Washington Monument. Instantly, every single one of our kids pulled out their phone and started doing that. And we said, put the phones away. Just look with your eyes, absorb. But everything now is being looked through the lens. And I'm just wondering if those images, if there's not something that triggers in your mind when you're playing, I know this is not real, because it's not affecting the eyes. It's just sight. All the senses are involved. Whereas when you're looking at a screen, you don't have as much sensory perception. It's just really the eyes and the image. I don't know if I'm going off target, but it would be interesting to find the research on that.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know if the research is there, but there is something to you using your whole body. So think of this, like, I know we're kind of diving into realms unknown, I guess, at this point, but you know how there's a new thing now of kids watching other people play video games.
Yeah.
So we went into a whole nother realm of where you're no longer, you used to play with your body, like you're going to kill somebody, you're killing your Yeah, you're playing with your body, but your whole body's involved, like you said. Your energy's involved. You're sweating out there. Like you're doing things that, even though you're doing imaginative play, it's still kind of healthy for you because that's how you learn. It's how you develop. But then also, like, your body finally says, "All right, we're shutting this down. Like, we're tired now. Let's go inside, get some, fruit punch and water." But then you go to this thing where you can play video games, and your body's not really sweating that much, but you're playing video games. You're doing everything you used to do, but you're no longer communicating. You're no longer getting the physical aspect of it. You are looking through the lens of just this TV, so you're no longer looking around, things around you. And then you combine. Now you add another layer where you're no longer even playing the game yourself and being creative. You're just watching someone else play and be creative. Like, what does that, you know what I mean? Like, just the idea of like hypnosis and passiveness of like, you're not even taking the initiative anymore to even play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you're not taking the initiative to think into it anymore. And the same thing with like using your illustration of taking a picture. Like, why not look at it and think for yourself what you think about that, rather than be like, what are other people going to think of this? You know what I mean? Like taking this camera, sharing, like, I just think there's so much to it of like, we're developing, people nowadays are passive. Like, they don't have creativity. They don't have thoughts of their own. And I think that's the problem, is that they're not thinking for themselves.
It's interesting too, if you look at, some of the, and of course you can overstretch anything, but some of the characteristics of addicts very, very, very much bleed over. I always think about the Office scene, the show The Office, and Ryan, who I think it was a BlackBerry at the time, but they're having a contest and he can't have his phone because you can't cheat. It's a trivia contest, and they said you have to turn in your phone, and he leaves. He says, "I can't not have my phone." He's addicted. I've got to have my phone. You watch addicts fidgety with their hands. They're fidgety. Their eyes are going a million miles an hour. And I mean, that's exactly what kids are doing.
Yeah.
Interesting. My son said to me one time, and he's 21 and serving the Lord right now. But he told me one time, he said, one of the things that's most powerfully addictive about gaming is, he said, even when I was playing, he said, I could only play for so long. He said, Dad, I think that the secret sauce that people don't realize what makes it addictive is when I'm by myself, it gets old after about an hour, so you get run down. Yeah. But he said, it's the ability to be able to connect with all my friends. He said, I can be playing with people around the world, around my community. We're sitting there, sometimes not even playing the same game, but it's just chat. He goes, and you can play that till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then you're just trashed. That connectivity, it's almost like another world that's being created. Are you seeing that from your side?
Yeah. And I talk about that being one of the dangers. Whenever I say I refer to a presentation that I do, one of the things God's been opening the door for is I have a presentation, like a 2-3 hour long presentation I do over the course of a couple of days with churches, and it's supplemental information to the book. It's not the same thing as the book. And in that, I go into a little more detail with like Facebook, specifically whenever we talk about social media platforms. And here's the thing, though, I'm not saying that your son feels this way. So this is, anytime you give stats, it's never across the board. But the studies show that the more people are online on social media, the less connected they feel to their friends and family.
That's exactly true.
And people, I think, too often, what's happened is that just because someone is your friend, or they're playing a game with you, or they're your friend on Facebook, doesn't mean that you actually feel close to them. And I think as a society as a whole, we've kind of said, well, I can be more connected online. It's like, no, you can't. Like, God created people, and he created you to be with people. And, you know what I mean? The people around you. And you need that person-to-person contact. And I do think that there's a danger in being too connected. Not to get into like the borders and things that God made, but God did make borders, and so they separate from each other. And whenever they all tried getting together, he said, I don't want you to get together. Yeah. I'm not saying video games are the Tower of Babel.
No.
But it's that idea, it's that drive of I can stay up on my phone till 2 a.m. and be talking to someone else that's still awake. And it's like, that's not healthy. Like,
it's not.
I mean, it's just not how God intended. He intended you to sleep at night. He intended you to have close relationships with the people around you. I tell people this. Like I said, I don't want to get off topic, but I said that he says that you are to feed the flock of God that is among you. In 1 Peter 5, that is among you. I think there's a danger with preaching to the people online.
Yes.
God wants you to preach to the people that are in front of your face. Not the people that aren't in front of you. And I not that I'm against online ministries. We have stuff online as well. I think this goes back to that idea of being too connected, and your mind is on people that aren't around you. And I don't know. That's a whole nother
No. It
No, but
is, because to me, this is an interesting conversation, because to me, there is a dovetail that has come in. And like I said, one of the reasons why I took the time to share my particular journey is because, like I said, this was never really on my radar screen in a huge way until I started my own health journey. Then I began to be educated in how powerful, and I use the word nutrition because, people think of diets and this and that. I'm not talking about that. And then that nutrition really becomes the whole person, the sleep. You were just mentioning a minute ago, I think that one of the reasons why, if I had to speculate, one of the reasons why I think play outside is so good is because we are designed to relate to our world physically in a tactile way. There's something to the touch, the smell, the taste. It's the whole thing, the sensation. If I'm sword fighting with Johnny with a stick and he hits me too hard, I feel that sensation. I feel that. That's why they're trying, if anybody's aware of the gamers, that's why they have the Rumble. If you're playing PS or Xbox, when you're shooting, you can feel the rumble, you can feel the controller vibrate in your hand. They're trying to give you that full sensation. So I don't think it's going off. I think one of the reasons we're having this conversation is because pastors are, in a sense, we're plagued by this. Our people are plagued by it, and we don't know how to address it. We don't know how to try to help it. You were just talking about it. I finished reading about a month ago, and I pulled it up, a book by Dr. Casey called Good Energy. They were on Tucker Carlson, and it's talking about health. But it made a statement. It said at the end, one of the biggest problems is fear, lack of sleep, stress. And it said we were never designed to carry the fear of the entire world. And that's exactly what happens. Now we're not just afraid of here. I'm afraid of what's going on in Ohio, what's going on in California, China, Taiwan, you name it. Social media has allowed me, even when you hear about horrible things happening to people, I would have never heard that before, but now I do. And it just this bombarding of massive amounts of information. So social media plays a big role, I think.
Right. And it does. And one of the things I bring up in my presentation is something little affecting us a lot, or something little affecting us a little. So that's why every person has to pray about, Lord, what's your will for my life in terms of how much time can I be on video games? How much time should I be on television? Like, I watch YouTube. I can sound, I could say I don't have a TV in my house, and that's true, but I have 3 laptops, 2 tablets, and
right.
You know what I mean? So I watch Soul Trap, I watch Bible teachers and things like that. But it's saying, like, Lord, when is too much too much? When is too many news clips too much? So I know about what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia. I know that North Korea just sent troops over there. I know that Israel and Iran and all these things are going on. I understand about the election. But I'll say this, I don't spend hours a day listening to that. I don't have Fox News or CNN or whoever. I don't even know who the other ones are now, News Sky and stuff. I don't have them running in the background all the time at my house, because I don't need to know all that. You know what I mean? Like, I have enough things going on in my family, in my own personal life, with my church members, with the people I'm ministering to. There's plenty of hurt and things to deal with in my own personal life. And I think it goes into that idea of, we justify it by saying, well, no, I need to be aware of what's going on in the world. And it's like, well, how much though? Like, how much is too much? And if it does stress you out, you mentioned the things that we see and hear. I show how whenever you hear something, like, for example, I'll give you a quick example, how it affects you. If I was to tell you a story right now of a book that I'm reading called Doris, the little girl who nobody loved. It's a real book. She became a missionary, but it's about her abuse as a child. Her and her little sister, her mom would abuse her, but love her sister in like a real sick way. Like, she would give her little sister hugs and would make her sleep on the floor. Like, wouldn't give her food, but would give her sister food. All this. I read this book and I cried the first 25 pages through. It was just a tearjerker. But here's the deal. I could tell you all the details of that book. And while I was reading it and seeing it with my eyes, and it caused a physical reaction in my body. I cried. Tears were evoked. Emotions were evoked. I felt tired after reading that, because I was hearing information and it affected my physical body. And I show in my presentation, and I try showing it a little bit in the book, but the things that you see and hear, whenever you see Donald Trump getting shot and those bullets, you hear him in the background, you see him jump down, that excites an emotion in you.
Yes.
And human beings were not supposed to know every single wrong thing and every single bomb that goes off and every single person that dies and all the rape and all the murder and all the economic issues of the whole world and all this information. I say this, I don't think we're that spiritual. You know what I mean? Like, if you're that spiritual, someone's that spiritual to be able to condense all that information and be like, it don't affect me at all. I'm just happy. I have the joy of the Lord in my heart. Like, I don't know. I don't think we were meant to.
Oh, no. And not to interrupt, but I think that this is something that needs to be said, because I think you touched on something there, and we're going to get into maybe somebody that don't like this, but I think when we say, I don't think somebody's that spiritual, I know what you're saying, and I agree with you, but I think one of the things that we've done is we have limited spirituality to simply spirit things. And I think to be spiritual means to be a whole person. I believe we're a trichotomy, body, soul, and spirit. And so there are certain biological realities. That's why the Bible says flee fornication, because your body will kick in quicker than your soul can catch up to you. You got to get away from that. Right. So I think that one of the things, just like I think people are going to sleep with high levels of cortisol. Their cortisol is they're not sleeping well. So that should be the lowest time when it should be reparative. It's not. They're waking up with high levels of cortisol. And so when you start factoring in these things, and again, I'm not trying to be a progressive. I'm not trying to be new age at all. But I mean, Daniel refused the meat. He refused the culture of Babylon. God spent an inordinate amount of time in the Old Testament setting up a cultural norm for Israel that was different than the paganism around them. And quite frankly, even the Apostle Paul, even though there's liberty as a Christian, he's saying we got to bring our body into subjection. Whatsoever things are good, think on these things. So these things are affecting Christians, and then we're walking into church with the same stress levels, the same distraction, the same inability of being able to focus, and we're going, what's the problem here? Yeah. And it's because the culture is ravaging the Christian home. What would you say to that?
I'll say two things quick. I'll say the book I'm writing on, Thou Art Mad, the reason why it's taken me so much longer, I've spent around 150 hours on this. The devil has fought me more on this. Because I'm talking about mental health, and I am being very careful in this one. So I am actually kind of going through and like justifying why I'm saying this and expounding more on things, because I have to talk about devil possession, where devils come from, unclean spirits, and things like that. And then I'm covering things like addiction, so drug addiction, but pornography addiction. I'm talking about pedophilia, sodomy, transgenderism, ADHD, schizophrenia, bipolar, mania, all these things. I get to be real sensitive whenever you start talking about some of those things. But one of the things I try to get across in the beginning is that don't tell me that you don't believe that in chemical imbalances, if you take medicine for high blood pressure, or if you take medicine for diabetes, or if you take ibuprofen, you believe in chemical imbalances because you're taking a chemical to upset the other chemicals. The thing that I'm trying to show is that there are such things as chemical imbalances, and those things do affect your thinking. Whenever your cortisol levels are off, that's a hormone, that's a chemical, we can call it, in your body that is off. And if that cortisol is active throughout the day and you're getting this blue light that is stimulating your neurons in your brain and keeping them active, and it's stopping melatonin, another chemical, from being released, then if that melatonin is not released, you will not fall asleep on time. Melatonin controls the release of other hormones like TSH and growth hormones, things that help your digestive system even. Like, you need all those hormones during the nighttime to be on a cycle. They're on a clock. There are times to life. There are times to your body as well. And blue light is affecting that, the stress of the world and things like that. It affects your sleep. And just to talk about sleep, what I would say to that is how it's affecting your body Adam, whenever he fell asleep, he grew. Remember, Eve came from him. God put Adam in a deep sleep. And studies show that, like, whenever you're sleeping, it does help as far as like just regulate everything, regulate your stress. So whenever you're dreaming, they think that dreams help you deal with the stresses of life, almost in a passive state where it's not actually draining you as much. It's not actually stressing you out as much as if it was actually happening. And so they think the better you sleep, the better you are able to deal with past trauma, past stresses and things. So it just goes back to the idea of just focusing in on sleep itself, I think that cell phones and technology are greatly affecting people's sleep, Christian sleep. And like you said, the pastors are coming into church just as tired as their flock. And they're trying to give them a spiritual understanding and give them spiritual enlightenment and things. And they're just as stressed out as their flock is because they're taking in all this information. They're on their phones and things too much. And I don't know if that's a good enough explanation, good enough answer.
No, I think you and I are literally just circling the same runway. We're right there, because I just recently was studying about the different, your nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system. But a lot of times what's missed is your gut. And it produces the majority of your serotonin to the brain. It's connected with your brain. Well, I'm a biblicist. I love the Word of God. I love the King James Bible. Of course, Paul talks about bowels of mercy. He talks about the seat, that what's going on. You just wonder how far ahead the Word of God really is. You've got, and I agree, where I don't agree with, and this is now getting off the weeds, or maybe we'll have you back when this book comes out. Where I probably don't agree with is I don't think that the Freudian, and that's the root and then the tree that grows from there, the Freudian talk therapy is healthy. I do think that there are certain biomarkers. If you got blood sugar and your blood sugar is off, you're going to be moody. If you're not sleeping well, you're going to be moody. But I think, the old, even Scott Peck's recently, maybe 20, 30 years ago, I think the child in you and the talk therapy stuff is not necessarily healthy. But there is a science to, you're not eating right, you're not sleeping right, you're pumping your mind and your brain full of blue light, full of all these images. And I think what you said is absolutely right. It's an information overload without the capacity to process it. And your body, I feel like people are just walking around with this ambient stress and they don't know how to release that. And I don't care how good of a Christian you are, you sit down and read your Bible, you pray, you're just wound tight. And so this book really, to me, I think, is a great starting point for any Christian, any mom, any dad to read. I think B, if I were a pastor, I would wholeheartedly recommend getting in touch with you and maybe scheduling you to come in. We're going to do that. I'd like to touch base with you and maybe we do what's called deep dives on a Saturday. Maybe we'll bring you in and do a Friday and a Saturday 2-part, deep dive presentation. I think a pastor should do that. I think if pastors aren't addressing this in some way, from just collecting the phones when you have a youth group meeting to something, we're missing out because our people are affected in a big way.
And one of the things that Lord kind of laid on my heart as far as if I would do something different with the next book, and even if the next time I just reprinted another, I forget, 1,000, I think what I'm going to do on the next, I'm going to do like an updated edition and provide more resources for pastors and parents. For example, things like I have in my presentation like 2 or 3 slides worth of like things you can do to decrease screen times. Like you can do like blue light filters on your computer, things like that. But also showing like there's an app you can get on your phone. I just downloaded it recently for if you have like a Christian school or you just want to do it with your children. But it's called Canopy, and it helps you track the screen time, regulate it better. And it's better than like Covenant Eyes because it just has a better security system. You can literally control the person's phone from there. So I know if I have a friend who has a Christian school with small 15, 20 kids, they all have to put this app on their phone and it literally shuts down everything. They can't message. They can't get on the internet. They can't even get on pictures. Like it can shut down, and you can go in and shut down, control everything. And because I want it to be more of a resource.
Have you heard of the brick? The brick, B-R-I-C-K. It's the same sort of a thing. You tap your phone to it and you pre-select when you tap it, and then it shuts everything down. In other words, it only will allow you to like use your phone and text. And so you would like put that on the fridge, you would tap it and then walk out the door. Well, you can't unlock it again until you're physically back there and tap it. And we have a guy in our church working with it right now to see how it works. But yeah, I agree with you. Resources are important because I think we're overwhelmed. A lot of guys might not have maybe the background in education or resources, and to be able to present that to people would be really good. What's the ETA on this book? What's the ETA on that?
Don't get me started on it. I started writing it over a year ago, but I had just started a new job at Ohio State at the hospital. I just started the church. I had my second baby. Well, my wife had the second baby, but we had our second baby. And so I prayed about it. As of September 6th of this year, I went full-time ministry.
Okay.
I actually quit my job as a therapist. My plan is I plan to go back working part-time at the first of the year. But God has been keeping me busy on the road and things, and also with the church. So my last meeting this year was in October. Last week, I was in West Virginia at preaching a revival. I'm not traveling anymore this year. My hope is that I'll be able to finish this book by the end of the year. Finish it as in have it printed by the end of December, at the very latest January. Okay. This book I am more passionate about. I have more of a burden for it. I genuinely mean it. I wrote Satan's Devices. I wanted it to help people. And I think it goes along with the idea, like, people are frustrated and stressed and they don't know why. And obviously technology plays a big part in it. What I'm covering in this book, I think the impact it'll make on individuals' lives, I think, will be even greater, because I'm going to cover things that we aren't covering as pastors. Like, we're not ministering to that kid in our youth department, 14 years old, that has a mom and dad that are in church, and that kid is bitter as all get out. And you know what I mean? They are self-conscious. They think that they're ugly. They think that they're stupid. They're being tempted with pornography. They're being told they're not rich enough. Their family isn't wealthy enough. And we're not actually preaching to where that kid can get something from our sermons. And that kid doesn't even know what's going on inside of their mind. Like, they don't understand it. They have pressure that kids did not have 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and beyond. And this book covers things like how the devil can get into your thoughts and get into your mind, and sin added in with hormonal changes, things like that, chemical imbalances, whatever you want to call it. I go through all that, and I show how Satan can get a stronghold on you, and how if you don't get victory over it, it could lead you down a dark path. You know what I mean? Really bad, ugly sins start out with really sweet, innocent sins. And that's kind of what I cover in the book. And that's one that I am passionate about, that I've written. I've cried while writing some of the chapters. Just the information in that book, I don't know if it'll be as well received. I think it'll be a little more confrontational. But I think the people that will get a hold of it, and it helps, I think it'll help them to a great extent.
Well,
that's my prayer, at least.
When it's ready, you let us know. We'll bring it on. I want to recommend this book, Satan's Devices, to anybody, anywhere. It has been a wonderful conversation. We've really only scratched the surface. It's not a big book, very readable, very doable. I think it could actually even be broken up and taught. Maybe you could take the book, and if I were so inclined, you could order a batch of these, maybe for a young adults class, maybe for a teen class, maybe even for a parent class. Young parents, catch the parents when they're young, do some teaching out of this. And then certainly I'm sure that people could contact you for further resources and questions. It's been an honor. Thank you so much. We're excited about the new book, and we trust the Lord continues to bless you, use you, and we look forward to talking to you again, Aaron.